Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the slight delay. Had a little bit of technical issues on this end, but we're finally getting started. I want to welcome everybody to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. I'm your host, demonologist and paranormal investigator Kevin Beers.
And I'm author and godfather of paranormal thrillers, Brian McKinley.
Okay, and as usual, we want to remind everyone that tonight's episode is brought to you by Audible. Anyone who isn't familiar with Audible, it's a fantastic service for audiobooks. If you're like me, you spend a lot of time in your car, it's great to be able to get something to listen to make things go a little better. If you want to catch up on your reading and you don't have the time to read a book, it sometimes is a good option. All of Brian's books, that's Ancient Blood, Ancient Enemies, and Ancient Dead, are on there.
Drawing Dead.
Oh, Drawing Dead. If you aren't a member of Audible yet and you're interested, go to audibletrial.com/paranormale, audibletrial.com/paranormale. You can sign up for a free 1-month trial, and you'll get a free audiobook with that too. You can pick up one of Brian's books or one of literally thousands of other books available on the website.
Some very good stuff.
Yeah. So that's a great option. I highly recommend people check out, and it directly helps the show if you do so. So the main topic of tonight, we're actually going to get into something that we needed to for a while, which is telling the difference between mental illness and demonic possession. But because of what failed to happen on the 23rd, I thought we should talk a little bit about the end of the world. If anyone didn't hear, on April 23rd, the world came to an end. Mm. Don't you hate when you miss the memo on those apocalypses?
I'm very sad to have missed the end of the world.
So apparently, looking into it a little, there was a guy by the name of David Mead, who claimed back in 2017 that the planet Nibiru was going to come by, which would destroy the Earth and Armageddon and all that happy nonsense.
Oh, so he knew about it when NASA and all of the telescopes and all of
Oh, they've been talking about NASA about Nibiru for at least the last decade.
Really? I haven't heard about it coming anywhere near us, though.
Yeah. There's the actual planet that they found, and then there's Nibiru, which is and keep in mind, okay,
stealth
I'll get there in a second.
It's got a cloaking device.
Yeah, after obviously we survived September 23rd and October, he again predicted the rapture was going to take place on April 23rd of this year. There's also a Christian numerology. I don't know if he's the one, but I know there was. What I originally read said something about Christian numerology, folks. And this is something I want to address because this has been going on since the earliest prediction I could find was 66 AD. People are constantly convinced that the world is going to come to an end. You may notice it never does.
Nope.
Now I can't. Addressing even like some of the major claims would take several shows in and of themselves.
Like the famous 2012, the Mayan calendar and all that. That was a good one.
Which was a complete misunderstanding.
Yeah.
The calendar's a wheel. Wheels don't end. But I did want to quote real quick, particularly in relation to Christian predictions of the apocalypse, from Matthew 24:36, which in the King James Version says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels of heaven, but no man." Oh, that one leaves out one of the things. Okay, I'll do a different translation. New American Standard. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. What I find interesting is that the King James apparently left out the Son part, which implies even Jesus himself doesn't know when the curtain is going to drop. So the ego to say, "I know," it's like, well, how do you know? Anyone? Bueller?
Yep.
Needless to say, and I suggest if you're interested, and I do suggest even if you aren't, because it can be pretty funny, go to Wikipedia and look up list of dates predicted for the end of the world. The list is huge.
Well, it kind of reminds me of that old Henny Youngman joke,
Mm-hmm.
where he says, guy went to his doctor. Doctor gave him 6 months to live. He said he couldn't pay his bill. Doctor gave him 6 more months. It's kind of like that. It's like, oh, the world's going to end on this date. That date comes. Okay, we pushed it back a little. I was wrong. It's actually next year. The world's going to end.
Yeah. See, the smart ones, and there's a bunch of them. This Nostradamus is probably the most prominent.
Yeah,
predict it way after they're going to die.
Right, so
that nobody ever calls them.
You can't call them on it.
Yeah.
If you say the world's going to end in like 3015, it's like, well, okay. How the hell are we ever going to know?
And looking at the list on Wikipedia, there's a whole bunch of them that haven't come true yet. Won't come true for decades or even a century or two. And it's like, the person who wrote that down wasn't going to know. Yeah. Apparently, interestingly enough, someone very famous who I didn't know was in the prediction business, Isaac Newton, predicted the world would end in 2060.
That's interesting. I wonder maybe he did some calculations or something based on something.
Well, he did a lot of. He was actually a theologian, not just a physicist. He did a lot of writing on the Bible.
Right.
So it may not be mathematical.
Wow. Didn't he also go crazy from like mercury poison? I think.
I don't remember.
I think he died in his later years. He succumbed to mercury poison and was kind of insane, which is sad.
But yeah, just the number of apocalypses we've collectively survived.
I don't know where I was going with that. It's
I don't know either.
Random fact that stuck in my head somewhere.
But this is really not the topic of the night.
No,
but it's fun. So
I know nothing about demons and mental illness, so you're kind of on your own. I'm just gonna.
Well, you are nuts.
I'm just gonna. That's true. I do know about the mental illness.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know about mental illness because you're nuts.
I just don't know about the demons so much.
Well, that's why why I'm here is to educate people about this stuff. Because this is one of the most common questions I get. When I've mentioned more than once on the show, I did an interview or a chat more with a skeptic that goes by the name of Chocolate Head on YouTube. And it's one of the questions that came up towards the end is, well, how do you know that somebody crazy? Is somebody actually possessed?
Right. And you've mentioned that, you've addressed that a few times in other shows in a general way. So I'm guessing you have something more
brass
in
tacks
depth.
and
okay. And maybe if we have time, you can go into the whole
grounds
and all that stuff that we were talking about before.
Either tonight or next week, we'll get into the how do you get possessed, and the state. So there's a whole pattern of
possession 101. Your guide to getting it.
Well, it's like, okay, if you're listening and you want to go do this yourself, you're out of your bloody mind, but we'll give you some advice. Or if you're listening and you think somebody is possessed, how can you tell? Well, I'll tell you, one of the great secrets of all this, by the way, is rule number 1. If somebody tells you they're possessed, you can be about 99.99999% sure they're not. And the logic behind why not is really actually pretty simple.
They don't like to spread that around.
If they start telling people, especially if they start telling someone like me that they're possessed, but if they start telling people in general that they're possessed, somebody's eventually going to go find a priest who's going to perform a ritual of exorcism and kick them out.
Yeah.
Demons don't want to be kicked out, so...
So if somebody says, well, I'm absolutely not possessed. I have some things wrong with me, but I'm entirely not possessed. Then maybe,
It's only maybe.
Then maybe you should look into that.
Another real common thing, and this is something a lot of the evangelical denominations don't understand and is very dangerous. If their condition, whatever it is, responds positively to psychiatric medication, it's not possession.
Well,
you cannot medicate
sign.
Demons.
Yeah, that's a big flag.
Yeah. Now, that said, because I don't want people to misunderstand me, because it's equally dangerous to make this mistake. Just because it doesn't respond to psychiatric medication, that doesn't mean it's a demon either.
No, there's plenty of things that can be psychologically wrong with you that don't go away with medication that
Yeah.
aren't necessarily.
And for that matter,
demons.
you may have something that will respond to medication. You might be on the wrong medication.
Right, yeah, there's hundreds. Usually anybody, I mean, I deal with this myself. I've been on, at least 3 or 4 different antidepressants in my life, and you try different ones and you see which ones have an effect, what combination, all that.
Yep.
Sometimes they start wearing off. I had one that was working fine that after a while just stopped being as effective.
Or you forget to take it a few times.
Well, there is that. That's kind of a different problem. That's
Well,
your
I've
own
seen that
thing.
happen with other people. They get careless. They get forgetful.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've done that. I've gone without my meds for times and usually regretted it.
Even for that matter, it can be if you're on a medication, you might be having a side effect. There's a whole series of things. So the first bit of advice I give anyone, because I've had people contact me before, that they think somebody in their family is possessed because they have they aren't diagnosed with a psychiatric condition, but the medication isn't working. So the first bit of advice I gave them is, go talk to your psychiatrist.
Oh, I just had a thought. When we start doing these, can we do a commercial for demonic possession where it's like one of those psychiatric medicine ads and it has like side effects may include, speaking in tongues,
Vomiting pea soup,
levitating objects, like just do it like it's one of those drug company ads.
360-degree cranial rotation.
Yes. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that is a good idea.
Demonoids. Talk to your doctor.
Knowing things you shouldn't?
What?
Knowing things you shouldn't?
Yeah. Knowing things about people you have no right to know.
And of course, on the other side, you have that thing they keep posting on Facebook, the joking, the many benefits of demonic possession.
Oh yeah. I haven't seen that one. I liked the you never responded to it, but I sent you that one where they had the
pink Ouija board.
The pink Ouija board that was like very, clearly being designed for like
yeah,
My
I've
Little
seen
Pony
that so many
fans.
times. I just kind of
Oh, okay. But I just thought that was funny. It's
For
like,
some
wow.
reason, people send me all of those memes,
Well,
ever.
Well, of course, because it's your wheelhouse.
Is it?
Yeah. I get sent anything even vaguely vampire related. I have my friends will tag me.
I think my favorite answer to the pink Ouija board was the meme of Archer going, "Do you want demons? Because this is how you get demons."
Exactly.
To be fair, there's probably easier ways to get them, too.
Cute little pink demons. You get little My Little Pony demons.
Honey, those are the elephants. We learned that in Dumbo.
Imps.
Pinkie Pie's pink, though.
She's not an elephant.
No, but she is a My Little Pony.
My Little Demonic Pony.
Buddha would love that.
Yes.
Be awesome.
If anybody's wondering, the Buddha in reference is a friend of ours, not specifically
the Buddha.
Siddhartha Gautama. Although he might like it too, for all we know.
He might. I think he had a sense of humor.
Here, let me call him.
Didn't know him personally.
Well, Budai, who people often mistake for the original for Siddhartha, definitely had a sense of humor. He's the chubby one.
Oh,
Is
right.
that the one where it's how do you escape the heat from a summer day? Jump into a fire?
That's a new one on me.
I forget what I heard that version. Like one of the stories of like people were going to him for wisdom, and it's like it's kind of like the whole Socratic method of if it's hot and you're sweaty, drink something hot because it'll make you cool down and then match the temperature outside.
Oh yeah.
Sort of deal. And I'm like, it kind of I forget which one I heard that from.
Well,
Forgot that.
Budai is most famous for the picture of the laughing Buddha, the short little fat guy that people constantly show pictures of and go, if Buddha's all about balance and temperance and denial of the self, why is he fat? And the answer is that's not Buddha.
Yeah. Well, it's like another cartoon I saw one time. It was Buddha and Vishnu up in heaven and Jesus, and the three of them are sitting there like comparing story, and Jesus is just like, oh my God, they get so many things wrong about what I said, and Buddha's just like, yeah, I know, man. They always think I'm fat. They always draw me fat.
See, now I'm just thinking of the cartoon of the Hindu girl praying, and the Christian girl praying, and then it's a picture of Buddha and Ganesh duking it out.
Yeah. Well, there is that.
Because the two wins the spelling bee. So whose prayers work?
Exactly. Whose God is stronger?
So every time, according to that cartoon, that two opposing prayers come in, they apparently have to have a WrestleMania Battle Royale.
Yep.
It would seem.
That's where the thunder.
Which
comes
raises
from.
some really interesting questions about. Well, then, but what about when it's two opposing Christian sects?
I think at that point.
Now I'm picturing.
Is it like Buddhist
I'm
Jesus versus Catholic Jesus?
No,
Or
I'm picturing
not Buddhist,
Jesus just sitting there going, "Stop hitting yourself! Stop hitting
No.
yourself!"
It's Mary's mother going against Mary Magdalene.
Oh, jeez.
See, I was just thinking of the Simpsons episode where you see Catholic heaven and Protestant heaven. And Protestant heaven's a lot of very rich, seemingly rich,
Yeah.
uptight
Wasps.
people, wasps. And Catholic heaven actually looks fun.
Yeah.
It involves fighting.
Well,
It's like the two of them duking it out.
it's either that or like Jesus just points at two angels and goes, "You and you fight."
Rock
Or could he
one,
do-
fight!
Or maybe they pulled Judas out of hell and go, Matthew, over here, because we all know you're the reject. You two, take care of it.
We're horrible people.
I'm not apologizing.
I didn't say you should.
Nope.
It's like we just insulted my faith. We just insulted the Hindu faith.
Yep.
And
Equal opportunity offenders.
I'm kind of inclined to say, if you're really offended by this line of joking, get a sense of humor.
Well, yeah.
I kind of
God has one. Why do you think he gave a donkey the power of speech?
verbally speaking, I kind of go with the Yusuke Uramesi concept of I'm a chibi, equal opportunity smartass.
But yes, God has a sense of humor. It's why the Balaam's donkey gets the power of speech.
And we have platypi.
Oh yeah,
I thought that was God getting drunk.
or possibly stoned.
Yeah. That was the Robin Williams explanation, I think.
Was the stoned one?
He's like, yeah, this looks good. Got a few extra parts laying around and just cobble something together.
Well, the thing I found it fascinating. Wow, are we off topic? We'll get back to it in
Yeah.
a minute. But is platypi are not the only mammals that lay eggs.
Nope.
There aren't a whole lot, but there are a couple of others.
Yeah, it's a little subfamily,
Yeah.
I guess.
The rest are all species of echidna. So back on topic.
Well, now you have to explain what echidna are.
Look it up, because I don't really know.
We will post the actual spelling later on after the show so people can look it up.
What fun is that?
Tonight,
Make
We
them
don't
guess.
want.
You make them guess.
tonight's special word is echidna.
The word of the day is echidna. Call in now to win a free toaster, except
Yes.
we don't actually have any toasters.
Well, or text.
I don't know. You seem pretty toasted.
Text hashtag echidna to Paranormal Encyclopedia on Twitter, and maybe you'll win something.
Or you just message us on Facebook. Or hey, you can call in 609-807-2492, 609-807-2492.
We won't actually give you anything, but we would just want to see if anyone's
Respect. We'll give them
actually
respect.
listening. Yeah, we'll give you a high five, a crisp high five.
The Twitter handle, in case
as
anybody doesn't
Deadpool.
remember it, is Encyclodemonology. Essentially, encyclopedia with up until the L, and then demonology. So at Encyclodemonology.
Ah,
So you can annoy us there too.
Yep.
So, back on topic.
yes.
So I covered at least some of the basic ways you can tell it's not demon possession. How do you know that it is? Universally, as I've mentioned in previous shows, the thing to keep in mind is demons are creatures of pride. It's going to reveal itself inevitably. You want to look at it doing something that can't be explained by mental illness. You know, a kid who spouts gibberish is probably mentally ill. A kid who speaks fluent Aramaic out of the blue, that's a little strange. And you will get that. You will
Especially with the state of education today.
Oh, good Lord. Heck, half the time speaking coherent English is almost a
Exactly.
supernatural event.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, not super. Though not in this case, we are not talking about supernatural.
Yes.
It's a very common mistake. Supernatural properly only means something that comes from God. Demons would be preternatural. And yes, you can look it up. That is the dictionary definition of the word. And yes, I know I'm being a pedantic pain in the rear end.
Yes, you're splitting hairs.
This is my job. I like to be accurate.
There's accurate, then you're being pedantic.
It's both. So, moving on.
Love tripping you up on air. It's hilarious.
Yeah. No, that's perfectly fair. There's 4 classic signs of possession, which are actually mentioned in the Ritual Romanum, which is the Roman Catholic ritual. They are the ability to speak in unknown tongues. Most often, this will manifest in dead languages: Hebrew, Latin, Aramaic, Greek, ancient Greek, obviously, and ancient Hebrew, since modern Hebrew is still spoken.
Yeah.
Technically, so is Latin.
Yeah.
There's 2 countries that officially have it as their language. One I forget, but they don't actually use it. It's just they have no single unifying language, so they just call it their official language Latin. And the other one's the Vatican, which is technically a country.
Yeah.
Has been since the 19th century.
Yeah. It's not a living language anymore because it doesn't really grow or change, but
No, it is
still-
technically
it's
a
still
living language, because
in
it's still
use.
in active use.
Well, there's a difference when linguists say there's
Yeah,
languages.
but usually
that are
when they
active
say
and
something's
used.
no longer a living language, no one's actively, like, it's something like Aramaic, where no one's actively using it as a language anymore.
Wow.
Latin is actively spoken outside of academics studying the language.
Yeah.
Because the Vatican is technically a country, and it is their official language.
Although most of them speak Italian.
Yes, but everything formal through the Vatican is always in Latin,
Right.
which gets interesting in its own way, but that's going off topic again. But the point being, it's usually an ancient language that nobody speaks anymore. Not always. I know of a case where the demon chose to speak Serbo-Croatian, specifically because the priest that was there at the time was raised speaking Serbo-Croatian. English was something like his 3rd language. But again, and this is another thing, and it's important. Anyone listening out there, myself included, can probably start reciting words in a couple of foreign languages. I mean, I know probably at least 3 or 4 words in Hebrew, Japanese, Greek, Latin, Spanish, French.
Yeah. People pick up a smattering.
But the key here is it actually has to be communication. They have to be able to speak back and forth with somebody else who's fluent in the language. Sometimes this can be very difficult, so you record, because you get what sounds like a language, you record it, you go to a university and you have somebody translate. But a lot of the times it'll be a language somebody there speaks, specifically because it's making a point and it wants to get a message across to that person. The next one that's recognized in the ritual is that, and Brian was referencing it earlier because he pays attention once in a while,
Once in a while.
is the ability to know secret events.
Yes.
Things that that person has no business knowing. They will know your deepest, darkest, most shameful secret. They will know what you had for lunch. They'll know where you were earlier in the day. They will recognize priests and refer to them by name, even without ever having met them before, when the priest is in plain clothes. Which is why priests frequently go out on cases in the most nondescript plain clothes you can see. Father Joe used to do cases in paint spattered overalls specifically for this reason. Which is always funny. You have a gang of investigators all in suits and ties, and then the priest, the guy you'd think would be the most firmest,
It's like, yeah, and we brought our carpenter. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, what? We
or
brought-
farmer.
Yeah, we brought our
yeah,
contractor along in case you needed a wall.
new
painted.
drywall.
Yeah.
But so from there they have an intense hatred for religious objects. Well, the react violently to holy water crosses, things from other religions, even when they don't know that they're in the presence of a holy object, like hiding a cross in the room. They'll know where the cross is. There's certain tricks you can do with holy water and holy salt. And I'm not going to get into detail about these, and I'm going to explain why. if you use one of these things on someone who's actually possessed, you're going to piss them off. And when you keep in mind the fourth sign, that's something you really don't want to do. Generally speaking, these are things you would only use specifically if the person's currently in a psychiatric hospital and can be physically restrained, either with rope or even chemical restraint, something that could stop them from beating the stuffing out of you if they become so inclined.
Straight jackets.
Yeah. The fourth sign is, of course, superhuman strength. And this, again, will go off the charts crazy. I know of at least one instance where one was able to, a man possessed by probably a devil was able to pick up a mower. And I don't mean just like one of those little riding mowers you buy at home. I mean one you find on a farm, the big heavy duty.
Oh yeah.
And it blew a flat. He picked it up and held it in the air long enough for somebody to change the tire. Now, certainly under certain strongly emotional circumstances, people will show considerable strength, but not when they're very, very calm, as a general rule, and this guy was.
Yeah. There's a difference between momentarily lifting a car
and holding it.
And, holding something up that weighs a couple tons.
And there are other signs. Objects moving on their own is another common sign of that. Isn't necessarily a sign somebody's possessed, but it's a sign you have something in your house. Which leads to another sub-question, as opposed to how do you know the difference between mental illness and demon possession, which is how do you know the difference between a ghost and a demon? And in this case, the size and weight of the object you're dealing with has a lot to do with it. If you're dealing with a ghost, or if you're dealing with humans' psychic ability, because there is a speculation that sometimes a little bit of psychic energy in a person, particularly in times of emotional distress, like puberty, will cause objects to move around the room, and that's where poltergeists come from. You're dealing with very small objects. Usually you're talking about something the size of a pound at most, maybe 10.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a demon, refrigerators will move. People will move. Heavy objects. Something when something's being thrown around the room that that a normal average size strength adult can't lift, something more than a ghost is going on.
Something else to keep in mind that when dealing with these guys legally, possession is 9/10 of the law.
Whack.
You know that joke had to
get in there somewhere.
Had to come in at some point in this discussion, so I'm just getting it out of the way.
And you needed a whack upside the head for doing it.
Yes, probably.
You always need a whack upside the head. Let's be honest here. So, and that's kind of the big thing is if you're dealing with something demonic, it's gonna reveal itself, and it's gonna reveal itself in a spectacular way. A lot of these, there are actually decent, well-researched horror movies that will give you an idea. While not everything in the movie is true, and certainly there's never been, to the best of my knowledge, a single case where everything in the movie happened in the same case, what you see in The Exorcist is based on actual cases. The only exception I know of is I've never found a priest that's actually seen somebody's head spin.
Because that would pretty much kill the person.
Yes. But everything else, the sounds, the voices, the levitations, all of that has been recorded for literally thousands of years. And again, once you're in that territory, it stops being an issue of, okay, they're floating 6 feet off the bed. Oh, maybe they're just mentally ill. They're floating 6 feet off the bed, and we're not at Siegfried and Roy's show. Something strange is going on.
Now, you get a little suspicious when the priest pulls out like a couple of big rings and starts running up and down the person. And
of course, granted.
Then you might think, okay, maybe I'm watching something that's a little staged.
But you will, if it is legit, you're gonna know. You're gonna see something that can't be rationally explained, and not for nothing. Especially if you're insane enough to get into this field, it is worthwhile to bring a psychiatrist and or a medical doctor with you to check for these things. Another good thing is get a family history. Do they have a history of mental illness? Does anyone in their family have a history of mental illness? What medications are they taking? The medication question is good for a couple of reasons, and I would suggest when you're interviewing somebody, you ask these questions. You ask, have you ever been diagnosed with a mental illness? Ask a bunch of unrelated questions and then come back to it, because it's a psychological way of getting them off guard.
Yeah.
Because if you just ask the one and then the other, it's going to be too transparent.
Yeah.
But sometimes people will list if somebody's on a psychiatric bed and they don't want to tell you because they're embarrassed by it or they think that you're going to dismiss what they're saying, they'll say, "Oh no, I don't have any history of mental illness," but then later they'll give you some antipsychotic drug.
Yeah.
And here's the thing to realize as well: you can be mentally ill and still have a demon.
Well, yeah, because mentally ill covers a very large spectrum.
Yeah.
Not all of it is psychotic or seeing things or having breaks with reality. I'm mentally ill and I don't, have any breaks with reality.
Well, even the ones that have breaks with reality, it's like it's possible to have both.
Yeah.
If something is happening that cannot be reasonably scientifically explained,
sure,
it's not, something more than mental illness is going on.
Still more, but yeah, there's no shame in saying, yes, I have anxiety, but I still saw what I saw,
And we're certainly, as Brian said, he has his issues. We have a number of friends that have issues. We're certainly not here to insult, make fun, or demean the mentally ill. There's many of them, even with some of the more severe disorders, that live, happy, productive lives, and never even claim to have these kinds of experiences.
Right.
And there are ones that do, and then there are people that have no history of mental illness that test positively that have these experiences. And for that matter, there's even if something isn't legitimately paranormal, there are plenty of examples of people who are not mentally ill who have weird experiences they can't explain, and they blame the paranormal.
Got half of like the Discovery Channel's and History Channel's lineup currently is made up of those people. All the Bigfoot shows, all the UFO shows, all of the ghost hunting shows. Obviously, lots of people are out there seeing things. They can't all be crazy.
And they're not all crazy. I think even most skeptics that I've spoken to acknowledge they're not all crazy. The question doesn't become, are they crazy? It's, well, what explanation is there for what they're experiencing?
Yeah, you can account for like probably half of them with relative ease.
Yeah.
Then another like however many percent, with different investigations.
Yeah.
But there's always that one little sliver, even if it's only like 1 to 5%, that just don't have any good explanation to them. So that's what keeps the things going.
And I'll give our
cases.
listeners some good examples of what we're talking about. Some of which actually do turn up in the medical literature. A real common phenomenon that gets mistaken for demonic activity all the time, that I'm willing to bet when I talk about this, there's going to be a fair chunk of our listeners that are going to go, "That's happened to me." Because it happens to somewhere around 60% of the population at least once in their life. And that's what's known as sleep paralysis.
Oh, yeah.
And I've had this happen to me, by the way. So, you wake up in the middle of the night, you can't move. Usually in this state, you feel a presence in the room. You feel a weight sitting on your chest. You may even see a shadowy figure or something like that. And after a few minutes, it passes. It can get very intense, very vivid. I've heard accounts of someone who woke up unable to move, saw masked intruders come into her house and rob it, and like full detail, and then leave, and then she woke up. That person actually suffered from a sleeping disorder known as narcolepsy, where this is particularly common.
Yeah.
So what's basically going on here is you have the interplay of two factors. One, you have sleep paralysis. So there's a function in our brains that when we sleep basically paralyzes us. This is why when you're most of us, when we're running down a dark tunnel in our dreams, don't get up and sleepwalk.
Yeah, it's what keeps you safe.
Yeah. It's a very sensible thing. We should all be glad that we have, because otherwise we'd be falling out of bed and running off cliffs and other crazy things all the bloody time. So that's one thing. The next is what's known as a hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucination. Basically, the part of your brain that governs dreams specifically is still engaged, but you're awake. They're, again, very, very common. Hypnagogic hallucinations happen just after you wake up. Hypnopompic are just before you fall asleep. They're really two terms of the same phenomenon. They are waking dreams. You are physically awake. You are aware. They can seem extremely terrifyingly real, but they are just dreams.
Well, there's levels of consciousness that your mind goes through as you fall asleep and as you wake up. So if you get caught kind of in one...
Now, again, this happens to a fairly large percentage of the population. It's fairly normal. Now, the catch is this can also be demonic and in Fae and a whole bunch of other types of spirits. How do you know? Look at what else we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes. You know, if all that's happening is when you're just falling asleep or just waking up, and nothing else, and no one else is having any experiences, my advice would be you might want to consider going to a sleep clinic.
Yeah.
If other people,
worst case, put a little camera on you to record while you sleep, and then watch and see.
I would definitely suggest going to a full-blown sleep clinic and getting it checked out, because it's
if
very common.
If it becomes an issue,
if it's happening if it happens once, don't worry about it. If it keeps happening commonly, and again, no one else has experienced anything, you haven't seen anything in your fully waking state, it could be a sign of a sleeping disorder of some kind that you want to get checked out that can be ultimately medicated.
Yeah. No, I just meant in terms of being able to quickly prove to yourself that nothing actually
the video footage is
to
also
you,
a good idea.
Yeah, while you're sleeping.
A good related thing along those lines, people will often come to me, and I just had this, although the case ultimately proved real, waking up and finding scratch marks on themselves, bruises that shouldn't be there. Here's the thing. I don't know about the rest of you, but as my fiance sitting over there can attest, I tend to move in my sleep a lot. It's very common, you bump into something in your sleep. You sleep, if you have a partner you sleep with, you may bump into their hand. You scratch yourself. You scratch, you got an itch somewhere. You scratch yourself.
People move when they sleep. They change positions,
and you don't realize it. For that matter, think of how many times you bump into things. Especially someone who's a klutz like myself. How many times you bump and trip into things over the day, and you may not even, if you get up in the morning, you did take a precise inventory of all of the bumps, bruises, and scratch marks on you, you're going to probably find at least a couple of weird things here and there. So don't get freaked out about that. Now, there is a very interesting example of this that I want to suggest people check out if you want to freak yourselves out, which is called the Dabsog. Dabsog is a type of demon, for all intents and purposes, from the Hmong people, which are Southeast Asian people that were displaced during the Vietnam War. Now, as I understand it, they were actually displaced. The U.S. displaced them from Vietnam to the United States for their safety, because basically when the war, as I understand it, they were in the line of fire. We got them out.
Yeah, they were being attacked by the North Vietnamese.
Yeah. So the problem is that they started dying. And you guys have heard of SID, sudden infant death syndrome. This is the same idea except with grown-ups. They call it sudden unexplained death syndrome. They die in the middle of the night, despite being completely healthy, and no attempt at a autopsy has ever determined a medical cause.
Yeah. Supposedly this and another case that he read about is what originally inspired Wes Craven to create Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Now, in Hmong culture, there's a belief in these creatures they call Dabsogs. Dabsogs live under the earth, and they have to be pacified with specific rituals. They have to be done at specific holy sites. They're forced out of the United States they're forced out of their homes to be protected from the North Viet, the Viet Cong. So not a horrible thing, but they no longer have access to the ritual sites. They're divided up. They're not all living together, so they don't have ready access to their priests and things of that nature. Now, in Hmong legend, these creatures come out of the ground, they sit on your chest, and they choke the life out of you in your sleep. This is a common legend you find all over the world. They call it old hags, night hags, succubi.
Nightmares.
It's tied into vampire folklore. If you read Dracula, there's the story of him coming into the room as a dark mist with the glowing eyes. That's a textbook example of this. There's a phenomenal book out there you guys would want to check out if you ever get a chance, called The Terror That Comes in the Night, which was written by a psychiatrist or psychologist, forget which, about all of this phenomenon. While he's not making a case that this is provably paranormal or anything else. He's just saying something very strange is going on with this phenomenon that we don't have a ready explanation for. We need to study it further to understand what's actually happening.
Yeah, there's obviously something in human experience that has given rise to these beliefs and legends.
What's interesting about SUDS, the sudden unexplained death syndrome, is it's unique to males, usually in their early 20s, from Southeast Asia, almost exclusively from the Hmong people. You don't find it in white. You don't find white people dying of this particular disorder. You don't find black people. You don't find anybody else except this one specific racial group, and it really only became a problem after their displacement.
Which makes me wonder if it's like some combination of genetics and something else, environment.
Which still raises the question: why have we never found an explanation for it?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm not saying that proves it's paranormal, but
oh yeah, but I'm looking for the non-paranormal explanation.
Sure.
But it's weird, certainly.
Well, you could also raise the question of what's known as psychosomatic death or voodoo death, which you seem to know what it is, but for our listeners, we should clarify.
Yeah. No, I get that. I just wouldn't think that would happen while they slept.
Well, they may. We don't. You don't know.
I'm just thinking maybe some sort of one of those weird genetic things where your heart suddenly fails. Like John Ritter, apparently died of some kind of congenital heart defect that was undetected throughout his entire life. They didn't realize it until.
Well, a friend of mine from high school died. He died in his early 20s of something.
Yeah. Something
like that. I mean, how often do you hear about a guy in his 20s dying from heart trouble?
Right. Which is why I'm thinking if it's this one specific racial group, it's like, well, maybe there's a genetic component.
Yeah, it's possible. Certainly, I'd be curious to take a look into it as an investigator, though for the most part, I believe it's not so common anymore.
Yeah.
This raises, for me at least, some questions about crib death, and because again, medically unexplained. There are to be fair, there are many examples of SIDS that are explained, because a lot of the time, tragically, it is child abuse that goes unnoticed.
Yeah,
they've found, but there are legitimately cases where they have no bloody clue what happened.
Yeah, and those are the most.
And there's
disturbing.
A host of demonic beings in folklore and in stories, most prominent, of course, being the first wife of Adam, Lilith, who deliberately targeted and murdered children.
Yeah. Also the Lamia.
Yep.
From Greek mythology.
Lamia, as an investigator, I have to wonder. And I'm not telling people with any degree of certainty that this is the case. I'd be curious to do, with time, money, and resources, I'd be curious to do a comparative study of, homes that have been routinely blessed, Jewish homes that have mezuzahs in all of the doorways and things like that, and more secular homes to see if there's any correlation or between our deaths more common in one or the other.
No, that'd be an interesting study.
But that would be a massive and expensive study.
It'd be tough to pull off.
And I think it'd be difficult to get anybody interested, because pretty much you're almost explicitly trying to explore something religious and paranormal in nature.
Yeah, you don't. Well, and also it'd be difficult because to find, like, how do you create a control group? for that.
Well,
You-
I'm
you either-
thinking it would more be a metadata sense of looking at existing cases.
Yeah, you'd have to go
Not
back
a
to
case-
people that
yeah.
already lost kids and
Yeah,
There was
not
no
a case of.
explanation.
You'd have to look at cases of SIDS, not try to test for new cases of SIDS,
Yeah.
because why would we want to do that?
and then you've got the problem of you have to go on what people say.
Yeah, it'd still, I think, be an interesting study,
Yeah.
but again, it wouldn't necessarily prove anything.
No, it might give you some curious
Although, if enough results all said,
thing.
most of the houses, it's lower, significantly statistically lower in houses that were blessed. It might be a really good case for getting your house blessed.
That's true. It's very common in China and a lot of societies. They don't. A lot of people don't move into a house until it's been like okayed and blessed by a geomancer or some kind of Taoist official.
Yeah, and I generally advise getting your house blessed here in the United States too. It's free. You can go to a Catholic church and just ask for a house blessing. They'll generally do it free of charge.
Yeah. I suppose if you're a skeptic, it's kind of like, what's it gonna hurt?
Exactly. And it's a good baseline protection against problems happening. And again, to go back to the idea of how you tell the difference between ghosts and demons, it can, especially early on in a case, it can be difficult because again, demons will try to mimic things to divert attention, but usually before too long, it's not real hard because it's more violent. A big difference is ghosts look for attention. Demons actively seek to promote terror. Usually, if you have a ghost in your house and it makes a teapot fall off a shelf and shatter, and you freak out because, the teapot just flew across the room and shattered. Nothing else happens. If you're dealing with something demonic, one teapot, and then the whole set might go flying across the room once you freak out, because it wants the fear and it's trying to promote that terror and that uncertainty. They basically, kind of in an emotional vampiric sense, feed on fear and hate and other negative emotions. Actually, this is a good segue. I'm going to talk a little generally about the case I had the other week on Friday the 13th. One of the things that surprised me is when you walk into a house that has actual demonic phenomenon, and this is not so much a sign of it as this case demonstrates, but it's one of the contributing factors when we get into grounds, which I think at this point we're going to wind up doing next week.
Yeah.
But usually, happy, well-adjusted homes, where everybody loves each other and works together, is very positive, are not breeding grounds for negative spirits. I don't want to go into personal details, obviously, to respect the client's privacy, but in this case, they were very nice, very well-adjusted. Part of me is like, okay, I'm not psychic, but I've been doing this long enough to get that sense when something's in the house. But this house is not the sort of place that should have something in it. And these people had had a horrible time, judging by what they had told us and all the information we gathered. I think they were probably under a curse. But they were still just so positive towards each other, which was wonderful to see because, yay, happy families. But it was just a little dumbfounding to go, but wait, why is it like this? When,
That's another show to do the curses,
oh, yes, very much.
what they're all about and how they work and why.
But particularly, I want to tell a funny story that happened at the end of the investigation.
Oh yeah,
Yes. So the family had they had before we got there 4 dogs. One of them had sadly died, I believe, a year beforehand. Now, we're sitting around in a living room, and we're going to do a house blessing. Because 9 times out of 10, and this is the other reason I suggest people get house blessings, 9 times out of 10, a house blessing will clear up a haunting all by itself. You don't need a full, exorcisms are the big guns. Most of the time you don't need, most of the time it's a bazooka to swat a fly. It's overkill. But just in case it required more than that, because sometimes it does, You need to get a priest involved. You need evidence. So we sat down to do some EVPs. We didn't get any spectacular results. We got a few, and like, okay, that's enough of that. I want to go. I don't want to be here all night. I don't want you to have to live with this any longer. We're going to do a house blessing. And to be clear, I am not a priest, but I found a Catholic ritual that was explicitly noted that was permissible for use by the laity. So it was something I could use as a layperson. I would not perform an exorcism because exorcisms are not for lay people. But I asked, actually, our producer Beth, who had happened to be there, to go out to the car because I had been a bonehead and left the holy water out in the car. Now, one of the 3 dogs is sitting next to me on the couch. I say, okay, let's do the house blessing. This dog jumps up, runs across the room, out into the next room, all the way to the door, barking her head off. And then just stops and calms down.
Yeah, that thing booked. It was hilarious. It's like, aww.
It's like, yeah, I've never had, and we hadn't even done a blessing yet. We just said, okay, let's go get the holy water. And in my opinion, as an investigator, that was enough to get it running for the door.
She like disappears like a cartoon, leaving like the smoke trail behind you. Like,
and the dog saw it out.
Yeah.
And we did the blessing, and as far as I know at the moment, it's gone. I've been trying to reach the woman to confirm, but I haven't been able to reach her. On the other hand, she hasn't reached out to me. It may very well just be some people, once it's over, they don't want to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Which is good, by the way. Take it from me. It's like once you've had something in your house and once it's gone, let it go. Obsessing about it will not help and can, in fact, make it worse. But again, most of the time you can tell it's not rocket science. If something's happening, that doesn't fit natural explanation. Objects flying across the room on their own accord, for example. You don't have mental illness. You've got something strange going on, and that's when you reach out to somebody like me.
Unless you have developed psychic powers,
which is still something unexplained and probably worth investigating.
It is, but then you got to watch out for the guys in the black suits with the sunglasses and the little,
No, men in black are interested in aliens, not psychics.
Oh,
that's a different department in the government.
They grab psychics too, and then they take them and they're never seen again.
Which is a whole other topic for that matter.
They work for the government.
For anyone who's he's not entirely making this up. If you're not aware, folks, during the 70s, the U.S. government experimented with what they they referred to as Operation Stargate. It was the 70s and 80s, and it was an attempt to use psychics to spy on the Russians during the Cold War. The Russians did it as well, by the way.
Yep. There's a great movie called The Men Who Stare at Goats.
It's based on what actually happened.
Yeah, crazy as it is, it happened.
Yeah.
And it was worse. The MK Ultra and stuff was terrible.
MK Ultra is a little different and much worse. Is actually
that was more
legitimately horrible.
Yeah, they ruined people's lives over that.
And for those who don't know, MK Ultra was an attempt to figure out how to mind control people using LSD, hypnosis, and some other techniques.
See if they could create...
it led to some absolutely horrible medical experiments, and basically is the reason we now have informed consent laws in the United States.
Yeah. Very, very unethical, very shady.
But it wasn't psychic, it was just mind control. And lo and behold, they got caught and brought before Congress. What's interesting with Stargate, one is they didn't take themselves real super seriously. You could tell because like the code names were Jedi and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other is there's actually at least some debate about why they stopped, or if, for that matter, even if they stopped. Officially, the reason that they stopped is that it didn't work. I've heard from people that were involved with it, no, it worked just fine. It was just, how do you convince Congress to fund psychic research in a more modern climate? And for that matter, there's also, of course, rumors that it didn't stop at all and it's still going on.
Yeah, there are people that believe that it's still like one of those black book operations that goes on quietly in the background.
which I actually sort of subscribe to, because believing this stuff exists, I find it very unlikely that there isn't somebody in the government looking into it.
I could see that. I mean, I would think if there's any evidence at all, I could see that, yeah, there's probably somebody out there pursuing it. If not them, some private company funded
I think
by
there's
some
probably both.
rich, eccentric billionaire that believes in the stuff, trying to...
Even if it doesn't exist, there's got to be there's going to be a couple of private companies run by eccentric rich people looking for it.
Well, can you imagine somebody trying to, like, weaponize ghosts, like using them for espionage and surveillance? How brilliant would that be if you
There's
could...
a role-playing game based on that exact concept.
Right.
Ghost Spy. The game was Spook Show.
Nice.
Because, of course, spook is a common euphemism for a spy. So
Well, it's an old, CIA term.
Half of what you're saying, I'm hearing in one ear, and it's like, what was I reading earlier today? Oh, Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, the supposed ranch that has lots of bizarre phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Although I thought I've read a couple of places that the whole thing was thought to be a hoax.
The few things that I saw, and they were like fairly recent, like within the last year. There's the road up to it is blocked off still, and it's guarded. So I'm not sure if they're actually setting things there. They're using it as a cover. So
See, it sounds a little too... I mean, because if you know anything about skinwalkers, it's a Navajo term for a witch slash shapeshifter that does horrible things. It kills people in order to...
Well, in the location
To get
where
their
it's
power,
at-
they have to kill a member of their immediate family.
but they also prolong their own life.
But no,
by
the
killing others.
Skinwalker Ranch is a specific place. It has skinwalkers tied to it. It has UFOs tied to it.
But to call it
the
that...
Ute tribe in the area specifically believes that their tribe got cursed by the Navajo. And that
I could see that.
that's
There's
why it's
still a
in
lot
that
of-
particular area. And
But to call something skinwalker... I mean, most Navajo won't even talk about skinwalkers.
Yeah, most native tribes that have any idea of
they won't talk about it
talk
openly.
about it.
They would
Yeah,
just say
they have strong taboos.
they would say that it was a curse. And the closest thing, I'm not sure what the exact thing was, like, because this was after so many people reported, because the last family that lived there had so many accidents in the course of, like, less than 2 years that they bugged out. Somebody bought it, and they were actually doing paranormal observations there for a while. That company went bankrupt, and another shell company essentially took in, and it's just been guarded ever since.
Here's the thing to realize as well, and this is true of especially anything alien, but by the time you hear about it, and actually it's true about a lot of the top secret things in the government, not just alien, but anytime you hear about something like Area 51,
Oh, yeah.
by the time it's public knowledge, all the really interesting stuff is gone.
If there was anything there, they moved it. Yeah, there is no Area 51 anymore.
Well, no, there is.
Well,
And
no.
it's kept as
they-
a clever front to keep people away from wherever.
Well, from what
it's
I
really-
understand, they changed the name of
Yeah.
it. Like, it's no longer called that, but even what used to be... Yeah, it's part of an Air Force base. They used to do jet testing there.
Yeah.
And if there was anything there... I mean, most of the Roswell stuff was completely
It's a
made up, and it's been known, but they keep digging
In fact,
it
the
back
alien
up.
story about Roswell was
Yeah.
made up by the government.
years after the fact. Yeah, and it was ridiculous.
No, there's parts of the story that come right after, but again,
But
they
they're
were
right
actually fabricated and spread by the government to hide real world Earth-based technology that wasn't paranormal and wasn't extraterrestrial.
No, it was like
But they
stealth.
wanted to keep hidden from the
Stealth planes
from
and
the
stuff.
Russians.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing. But generally speaking, Delta Force, U.S. Navy SEALs, any of these black ops groups you know about, by the time you know that they exist, there's at least 2 or 3 more doing the same thing that you haven't heard about yet.
Yeah.
Because which isn't to say that the SEALs aren't one of the most badass groups in the world. They are. They still do high-profile, important missions like taking out Osama bin Laden.
Yeah.
But there are other groups that are more clandestine still in operation because of the fact the government has some idea of how to keep things secret. And sometimes the best way to keep things secret is to give everybody something very public to watch.
Mm-hmm. The old misdirection.
No, if I was if I was the government and I had the alien spacecrafts, I'd build, once rumors leaked out about Area 51, I'd move everything to Area 51A, and then just keep the security up around 51 to keep everybody's attention focused in the wrong place.
Right. Throw a couple of like weird things there just to keep the interest going and let people go crazy.
Personally, if you wanted to be really clever about it, you covered the fake site with lots of guards, lots of heavy artillery, and then the other one you just have like an unmarked locked door on another military base is the actual Area 51.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, the real like Area 51 doesn't look, like anything.
It's very nondescript.
It's all
There's nobody
underground. Above ground, there's nothing but like, some.
It's like an unmarked door in an office building.
Yeah, it's like some sort of, it's a vehicle storage for for this base or whatever.
Yeah. Or it looks like a broom closet. Probably might even be a fake. You open it and it's a broom closet, and then you have to code on the back wall opens an elevator or something like that. Like the government isn't terribly bright. No, particularly given people in charge at the moment. Yeah. But they do have some idea of what they're doing.
Well, and also remember the military isn't necessarily the government. The military generally knows what it's doing and operates on its own thing and only tells the government what it needs to know.
We should actually, given time notes, we should wrap up.
Yes.
Especially because we did want to do that other thing before we get out of here. Okay, folks, that's going to wrap it for tonight. I want to
thank. You have 5 more minutes, dude.
I know, but we had the other thing we wanted to film.
Okay.
Remember? Or Gene should remember. I don't think you were here. So that's why we're going to do another thing. Basically, we're going to do a quick promo for our Patreon, which is why we're going to wrap this up now. And then we'll film that, and then we'll actually get out of here. So, folks, I wanted to thank you for tuning in. It's been a lot of fun. Next week, we will basically continue the logical path of this discussion and talk about the stages of demonic attack and specifically grounds. How does something get into your life? That's going to wrap it up tonight. I want to, this is Kevin Mears, demonologist, wanting to say good night and God bless.
Good night. I got
Nanu.
I still need a sign off line.
Yeah.
Oh well.
There you go. Since you're an agnostic, good night, and Richard Dawkins bless.
Say it.
Okay.